This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Meet Mowgli, the man cub. Baloo thinks he'll make a darn good bear. Shere Khan thinks he'll make a darn good meal. It's the Jungle Book, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We're right smack dab. I say smack dab, not really smack dab. We're finally in the summer season in our part of the world, and it's feeling like the jungle.
Feels like
outside for us. So this is a very fitting book and movie that we're covering today, The Jungle Book. We've got quite a bit to talk about. We do not have a Guess Who segment this week, as is often the case with some of these kind of books that tend to be like more kind of kid. Is this a kid's book? Or like a young, like what would, no? I don't know. We never talked about that.
It's hard to say because it's old.
Yeah. Okay.
So like yes, but also no.
Okay, interesting. Anyways, but we do have the rest of our segments, so we're going to get it right into it with Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
The Jungle Books are a collection of short stories, some related and some not. I read 4 of the Mowgli stories for this episode, so I'm just going to give a quick one-sentence summary of what each of those is about. Mowgli's Brothers is about how Mowgli came to live with the wolves and why he eventually left the pack. Kaa's Hunting is about Mowgli being kidnapped by monkeys and Baloo, Bagheera, and Kaa the snake working together to bring him back. Tiger is about Mowgli going to live in the village and later killing Shere Khan. And How Fear Came is about Mowgli learning from Hathi the elephant how the jungle was formed and why tigers are no longer trusted by the jungle people.
All right. And in case you have not seen The Jungle Book 1967 in a while, maybe since you were a little kid, or maybe ever, who knows, here is a brief synopsis of that film. A baby Mowgli is discovered amongst the wreckage of a boat by Bagheera, a Black Panther, who decides the best course of action is to leave him in the care of a pack of wolves who raise him as their own. 10 years later, we catch back up with Mowgli and the wolves, and they're worried that Shere Khan, a fearsome tiger, has returned to their area of the jungle, and upon finding Mowgli, will kill both him and the wolves that he now calls a family. It's decided that Mowgli must be returned to his own kind, humans, to spare them all the wrath of Shere Khan. Bagheera and Mowgli embark on a trip to find a group of humans for Mowgli, upon which they encounter a fun assortment of animals, including a strict but bumbling group of elephants, a treacherous snake, among others, and a friendly bear, Baloo, who's just out here trying to vibe. Baloo and Mowgli become fast friends and plan to live together until Shere Khan shows up. A fierce battle ensues that leaves Shere Khan running in fear from fire and Baloo badly injured. Baloo does recover, but shortly after, Mowgli encounters a young village girl and becomes enamored with her. He decides to return with her to her village and live with humans, a decision that both Bagheera and begrudgingly Baloo agree is best for everyone. So there you go. That is a synopsis of both the book/books and movie. I have quite a few questions, so we're going to get right into those in Was That in the Book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So as I just stated in the synopsis, this opens with Mowgli being discovered among the wreckage of a boat. And I wanted to know if that was how the book starts, because in the movie it's very Moses-y. Mm-hmm. Typical Moses, like he's like in a little basket washed up on the shore amongst the reeds or whatever. And in the film, he's discovered by Bagheera. a panther who finds him and then brings him to a pack of wolves to be reared. And I wanted to know if that was the same setup for Mowgli's backstory in the book.
It is not.
Okay.
He shows up nearby the wolf den, small Mowgli. They call him a baby, but he's at least like 1, I think, because he can walk in the book.
Oh,
He can
okay.
like toddle.
Yeah, he's much smaller in the film, I would say, because he's like in a crib, basically.
Yeah. But he shows up nearby their den, and it's revealed shortly thereafter that Shere Khan like stole him from the nearby village, did a little baby napping. And baby Mowgli like somehow managed to toddle away to the wolf den.
Oh, okay. From Shere Khan.
Yes.
Interesting.
I think it makes sense for Bagheera to find him, as they do in the film, considering that they end up being important to each other in both the book and the movie. However, there are some elements of the opening that I felt were better in the book.
Okay.
One thing is that I like Shere Khan having it out for Mowgli for some reason other than him just being a human. And then Mowgli ends up being like a preteen who has an eternal blood feud with a tiger, which is kind of dope.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that would be more interesting because the movie's version of Shere Khan shows up, and from my memory, the wolves are just like, he's gonna eat. He's gotta want to eat Mowgli. Yeah. Obviously, because that's what he does. He eats people. Like I don't know. Like it just seems like kind of like they don't. I mean, again, the movie doesn't really care. It's just like tiger. He's gonna eat that person, and then he's also gonna eat us. But giving them a bit more of a backstory.
Yeah, because Mowgli's like the prey that got away.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I would have preferred that, and I bet that some of the other versions of this story probably do something like that.
Also, Mother Wolf is a total BAMF in this scene.
BAMF, bringing out the very dated
cultural
lingo.
I'm trying to not actually curse in this one.
Yes.
Because it's for children. But when Shere Khan in the book, he like pokes his head into the wolf den and he's like, the man cub's mine. Give him to me. And Mother Wolf is like, do you know who I am? And it turns out that she's such a crazy good fighter that her name means the demon. And Shere Khan is like, ha ha ha, never mind. And she's like, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
But in the movie, literally all she does is like smile a couple times.
The film really overall does shortchange the relationship with the wolves.
Yeah.
Like they're apparently the ones who raise him for 10 years and then we immediately leave them.
Yeah.
And spend all the rest of the movie
never to be seen again
with Bagheera and other animals. And I thought that was a little bit of an interesting choice. And it's actually one of the things that made me forget that Mowgli was like the trope of raised by wolves. Like I forgot that he was raised by wolves. Yeah. Because in this movie they're in it for like 5 minutes. Not even
we barely
like 5
see
minutes.
the wolves.
And I like if you would have asked me before rewatching it, I would have been like, I think like a bear raises them or a panther. Like that would be my guess. Like if I had to answer a trivia question.
No, they're more like fun uncles.
Yeah. Yeah, they get all the credit and all the kudos without doing all the work. So then I mentioned it a second ago, but the return of Shere Khan is what sparks the wolves to decide that they need to have a vote and they need to kick Mowgli out of the wolf pack, basically, and return him to humans so that Shere Khan doesn't kill them or kill Mowgli and the rest of the wolves for like harboring him or whatever. And I wanted to know if that is the same sort of impetus for the journey that Mowgli and Bagheera go on in the film, if that's the same from the book.
Not really. This is all way more complex and layered in the book. So when Mowgli is a baby, the pack council meets, like we see in the movie. They meet to discuss whether he should be considered part of the pack and be entitled to that protection. And Bagheera and Baloo both speak for him, and he's accepted into the pack. And this is something that I would personally consider to be better in the book, although I do understand why the movie would want to simplify things. So after the pack elects to accept Mowgli, Shere Khan is furious at being denied what he believes he's owed, but basically he has to respect the pack because that's how jungle law works. And law and order is a major theme in the books that the movie doesn't really do anything with. So as like an overall community, like the jungle community, they have all of these codes about how things are done and how they interact with each other. And as long as everyone is obeying that code, everything is fine.
Right.
It's when codes are broken that trouble starts.
Okay.
But there's some interesting kind of political intrigue in this story, actually. For instance, it's implied that part of the reason Bagheera speaks for Mowgli at that initial meeting is that he thinks Mowgli will one day cause Shere Khan's downfall.
Oh, so
Yeah.
he's
He's
the
like
prophesied
he's
one.
like playing the long game,
Right.
like Littlefinger style.
He's like, we got a human here. He can use weapons
Yeah.
eventually. We can get him to take down Shere Khan.
But after the scene, the story time jumps. Again, similar to what we see in the movie, to when Mowgli's like 10 or 11, and it's revealed that Shere Khan has spent that last decade like getting in good with some of the younger wolves in the pack and like slowly undermining the pack's leader, Akela, by basically grooming these younger wolves to believe that they shouldn't have to obey the rules of the pack. Akela eventually does get deposed, and Mowgli winds up having to go live in the village. So it's like a little bit of like Game of Thrones style, like political intrigue.
Interesting.
At
Yeah.
this moment
And
in the book.
translating this to a children's movie,
Mhm.
which may be already from a somewhat children's based book, depending on how you want to read it, but like that makes sense to maybe not go into all the political intrigue of.
Right.
Yeah, but it is definitely more interesting for sure. I did just look this up because I wanted to know, because it was driving me crazy, because in the prequel we had a brief discussion where I mentioned something about being, I don't even remember the context of our conversation, but I said something about if this were set somewhere else, there were like with wolves and whatnot. Do you remember what I was talking about? And you're like, well, there are wolves in the Jungle Book and bears in the jungle. I don't even remember what it was, but I just looked it up because I thought this was true, but I just, based on that conversation, I ignored it. Wolves and bears do not live in the jungle in reality. That's all made up for this story in the book.
I mean, there are types
there
of
are two
bears
types of bears. I
in
just looked it up.
India.
There are sun bears and there are panda bears that live in the
There
jungle.
are Himalayan brown bears.
Not
in
according to
India.
this one website.
I don't know if they live in the jungle parts of India, but I did look up because I was curious
yeah.
what kind of bear Baloo could possibly be. We have more notes on that later.
Anyways, because I just looked up and said the only two that can be found in a jungle would be a panda bear or a sun bear.
Yeah.
Most bears live in forests and mountain ranges. Anyways, and wolves, there are no wolves in jungles. So,
Yeah, Kipling definitely plays a little fast and loose.
yeah.
He's no Darwin.
No,
Right? He's not being science here.
It was just interesting because I thought, yeah, like I said, based on that conversation, I was like, well, maybe, and my brain was just like, oh, maybe there are wolves and bears in the jungle, and they're not really. But anyways, and I was just thinking of that again because of the whole politics of this whole thing. Anyways, all right, cool. But yeah, I agree. That would have been interesting to see some of that. And that's another one that I wouldn't be surprised if some of the later adaptations, because at least like the live action one that I remember from the 90s, from my memory, was aimed at a slightly older audience.
Yeah.
Like it's not like a kid's movie. It's more of like a family, like adventure movie kind of deal where like Mowgli's like a teenager or like a young adult or whatever. And so some movies like that, it wouldn't surprise me if, or maybe even the more recent Disney live action version, quote unquote live action version, plays it a little bit more with that political intrigue than this version does. So, as I mentioned, this is the impetus, them being scared of Shere Khan and kicking him out, but then, and saying Mowgli needs to go back to the humans. But then in the film, what happens is the wolves don't take him, and I don't remember exactly why, but Bagheera ends up basically being the animal to kind of help him try to find a group of humans to go live with. And I want to know if that was the same in the book, and why. Because I don't know if the movie explained it. I think they did, and I just forgot why is that Bagheera.
I think the idea in the movie is that at that point the wolf pack has basically like washed their hands of the whole situation.
Well, I think Bagheera comes in the movie and says something. He's like, "Let me do it," for some reason, and I can't remember. Anyways,
it's because the movie wanted it to be Bagheera and Baloo and Mowgli on a road trip.
So that leads to my question. So it was not the case in the book?
Oh no. When Mowgli does go to the village after the previously discussed events, he's the one who decides to do it. I mean, it's not safe for him to stay, so that's arguably forcing his hand, but nobody has to, like, force him to go on a road trip to the village.
Okay.
And this kind of brings up a point of contention that I have with this movie, which is that Mowgli has lived in the jungle for essentially his entire life.
Yeah.
Right.
From the fact that he was a baby until
like
now.
long enough to where he doesn't remember not living in the jungle.
Yeah.
And in the book, you can tell. Like, he's capable, he understands what's going on around him, he understands, like, the different kind of players and animals that there are in the jungle. And Mowgli kind of seems like they kept him confined to the den for the entire decade, and he's never been outside.
It does almost seem like he's been living some weird sheltered, like,
yeah, like,
life.
I have to ask, like, why is he so disconnected from the community and culture that he lives in? Like, he's supposedly lived in the jungle for his entire life, but it does not seem like it.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get to this more later because, yeah, I agree, and it feels really weird. I don't want to spoil it, but I did not really like this movie on revisiting it. It did not do much for me. There's some fun songs.
Yeah.
But like overall, as Disney movies go, I got very little out of this one. Overall, not nothing. And there's moments that, and again, there's moments that I remembered from my childhood that I was like, oh yeah, it gave me some nice little nostalgia moments. But overall, I was like, I don't know. And that was one of the things. It's just like what his character, he's such a thin character, and he does just kind of seem like he's being drug along by these other animal characters in a way that feels like there's the whole scene where and we'll get to this specifically more later because I glanced ahead at a couple of your notes where like he's trying to climb a tree. Bagheera's like, here, climb this tree, or maybe it's Baloo. I think it's
Bagheera.
Yeah, it's like climb this tree, and Mowgli can't climb a tree, and I'm like, you've lived in the jungle, you can't climb a tree. Now, to be fair, you live with wolves; they're not like tree climbers, but still, like, yeah, what have you been doing? Like, it's just very strange.
But the movie also specifically says that he hangs out with Bagheera a lot. So, like, why wouldn't Bagheera have taught him to climb a tree by that point?
Well, and the point is, it all comes back to the central thesis that the film gets to, which is really weird, and we'll get to it later, which is that he doesn't quote unquote belong in the jungle.
I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Which is, we'll get to that discussion more in depth later, but that's what that's all about. And it feels weird because it feels like they artificially make him not belong in the jungle by like having him not have had any experiences that he would have had living in the being raised for 10 years in the jungle.
The movie tries to play him like he's a fish out of water when it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
He would not at all be a fish out of water.
Yeah, I agree completely. So we run into Ka the snake at this point, who can hypnotize people, and I want to know if that comes from the book because that was wild. I forgot that the snake in this movie can just straight up do hypnotism magic. Yeah. His eyes flash different colors, and then he's like, "Surprise, you're hypnotized." He sings a song, and yeah. And I wanted to know if that comes from the book, or if Disney was just kind of like going out on a wild one there.
That actually does come from the book. He doesn't hypnotize Mowgli, but we do see him hypnotize a bunch of monkeys. And it's kind of scary.
That's interesting. I wonder what the thought process there is of like having a snake. Like that's not like a typical trope for snakes.
Well, I think a snake being able to hypnotize its prey is like an I don't want to say archaic. That sounds too old. It's like an old belief. Like a belief that people used to have that science has now kind of disproven.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes, like, if you see a snake, like, coming up on a mouse, it can kind of seem like they're, like, hypnotized in place.
Okay, yeah.
But, like, it's really just because they're scared.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because to me, I was like, it's typically that trope you see, like, in reverse, that snakes can be hit, like...
Yeah.
Because, like with snake charmers, and, like, that's the typical version of that, is, like, snakes... If you like play music or do whatever, you can kind of hypnotize them, which is true at least to some extent. Not hypnotized, obviously, but there are ways to like sort of short circuit their dumb little snake brains and get them to like kind of do what you want them to do, or at least not bite you and stuff like that. Again, it's at least true to some extent. And so I thought maybe it was like playing with an inversion of that. But now that you mention it, I do recall that kind of idea that snakes somehow.
I don't think it's like a commonly referenced thing anymore.
Yeah, definitely not. So then after we have our little encounter with Ka, we then run into the elephants, a whole group of elephants, and they're in the film. They're marching, and that's like their whole thing is they're run by this head elephant. I can't recall his name now. Who is basically he's like the general, and he like whips him. He has like a little. He's like Patton. He has like his little whatever the thing Patton had, like riding crop or whatever. And he like whips all the elephants into shape, and they march around and they sing, marching songs and whatnot. And it's a fun little scene with them, including the baby elephant voiced by Clint Howard as a very small child, which is so funny because Clint Howard I only see as old Clint Howard now, who's, if you know what Clint Howard looks like, he's a very distinctive looking man, and imagining him as a child is wild. But anyways, I wanted to know if that dynamic of the elephant characters, assuming we have elephants, which I would imagine we would, is something that comes from the book of like this military marchy precision-y like dynamic thing.
That character's name is Colonel Hati.
Hati, okay.
And there is an elephant named Hati. We meet him in the story How Fear Came, and he's referred to as Master of the Jungle and seems to be like an elder/leader kind of figure. I never got a military vibe from him, though, in that story. Okay. There is another story in the Jungle Book that has nothing to do with the Mowgli plotline. That's called Her Majesty's Servants. That's about military working animals, one of which is an elephant.
Yeah.
I didn't read that story, but it's possible that the movie's inspiration was pulled from that.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because, elephants are definitely one of the animals that were used militarily through history. So,
I mean, it's also possible that it's just a post-war reference.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, who knows? Who knows? It's interesting, though. And the scene's fun in the movie. I enjoyed it. So, assuming, I'm going to assume not here, but nevertheless, I'm going to ask because I always ask this when we do like a Disney movie or whatever. And is that, are there any songs or poems or anything that could have been translated into the songs we get in the film, in the sense that, and usually the answer is no, but like Lord of the Rings, if there was a Disney version of Lord of the Rings that had songs in it, it could be from the book. There's plenty of songs in the Lord of the Rings books. So I just wanted to know if the songs are pulled from anything from the book.
There actually are poems in these books. I didn't see any that I thought seemed like they got translated over. I just kind of glanced at them.
Yeah.
But
it seems unlikely.
Yeah, it's pretty unlikely.
Think Disney would be taking their writing notes from Rudyard Kipling's poetry. But that being said, what is the context of the poetry in the book? Is it like non-diegetic? That's not the right word for writing. I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? Like, is it like people reciting poetry within the story? Is it?
No, they're usually if there's poems, it's like between two stories.
That's what I meant when I said non-diegetic. Again, I don't know what the word for that would be, where it's like not something within the story you're reading. Because, like, non-diegetic is in film, like, the audio you're hearing, like, the music, the score is non-diegetic because it doesn't exist within the world of the film, but occasionally you will watch something where the music does exist within the world of the film. And so it's like that, but for
I don't know off the top of my head if there's a term for that in a book.
It might even
I kind
be
of like non-diegetic. I think it still works.
Yeah, anyways. There's one elephant in the movie who's just got bloodshot eyes the whole time and is very out of it. And I was like, is that elephant supposed to be high? And I asked if it was in the book or if there's any reference or what your take on that is.
It's not in the book. I probably question mark. It seems like a valid reference for the time too.
I don't know.
Late 60s.
67. Yeah. I don't know what else it would be. He's got bloodshot eyes and he's like kind of, goofy and like
he's
out
like
of it.
Kind of zoned out and like chewing on something the whole time.
Yeah, there's no way that elephant is not just stoned. All right, fair enough. So then there's this great line in the film that I wanted to know if it came from the book. Is there? I don't remember who he's talking to. It might be an elephant, might be somebody else. But I think Bagheera is talking to somebody about what he's doing.
Yeah.
Do you remember who he's talking to?
I think that's Baloo that says this line.
Oh, I think it is Baloo. You're right. This is finally when he bumps into Baloo, And he's talking to him. He says, yeah, I'm taking him to a human village because he's a human, blah, blah, blah. And Baloo says, a human village? They'll ruin him. They'll make a man out of him. And we both laughed at that line. It's very good. And I wanted to know if that came from the book.
It is a pretty good line, but it's not from the book.
Okay. Which did seem a little too self-aware for Rudyard Kipling, to be honest.
Well, and Kipling's prose, and especially his dialogue, is a bit more formal.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me either. That does not. Definitely the most famous song from this movie was the one that was nominated for an Oscar. And it is the most memorable song, I would argue. I'm sure some people have other ones that are more memorable, but general audiences, The Bare Necessities is probably this movie's most lasting cultural impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if anything about that song, about like from the message to the characterization of Baloo we get from it, anything about it comes from the book, or if that's purely the Disney Corporation.
So I would say that this is like 99.9% the Disney Corporation and a 0.01%, because Baloo does act as a teacher to Mowgli in the book, but that's literally the only similarity.
Right. But he's not. Is the characterization of Baloo at all similar? Is Baloo sort of this carefree, like, go with the flow,
Absolutely
float
not.
on your back down the river?
No.
Just vibes, kind of. No. Okay.
No.
All right. Cool. I'm interested to know what Baloo is like in the book then. All right. So I assume this is a thing that I forgot this movie does, which I did enjoy. Is that the movie does, it's all sort of like little vignette stories. It's just as they're on this journey, like we get the setup in the first 10, 15 minutes. Mowgli, adopted by wolves. Oh no, tiger coming to eat him. Got to get him back to humans. Then we set off on this journey. And while on this journey, we have a bunch of little like short vignettes where we run into different animals and, you know, they sing a song or they talk about something and we learn a little bit about what their whole deal is. And so I was wondering if that sort of vignette storytelling was something that comes from the book. And I assume it is, though. I'll let you confirm. But I assume it is because, as you mentioned earlier on, this book is a series of like short stories, basically. So, the vignettes, is that?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. Disney essentially cobbled 3 separate stories into one narrative here. And while I think they did make some good decisions while doing that, it does feel episodic and disconnected at times.
I agree, it feels disconnected. I think my biggest issue with it is I like that for this kind of story, the little episodic vignette-y type deal. I don't, most of them don't say anything interesting. Is my biggest problem. It's like, oh, the elephant scene is fun, but like what else is it? Like what? Yeah, like what are we getting from it in terms of like Mowgli or his? You know what I mean? And maybe I'm just, I don't know. And like a lot of the scenes kind of felt that way. Like this whole scene with Ka and stuff. It's like, okay, we have this like secondary villain. But like, I don't know. It just felt like we're doing all these little vignettes, but they're not really doing any. They're not really moving the story in any way that feels interesting.
Yeah,
I guess was kind of my problem with it. But they are fun, which, you know, that's the point, I guess. So fair enough. Speaking of those vignettes, we then get our vignette with King Louie and the other orangutans or apes, or I don't know if they're all orangutans. I think they are, because he's an orangutan, right?
Yeah. Well, the other ones seem more simian. Is that the right? Or is simian apes?
I think simians are apes, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Well, the other ones feel more like generic monkeys to me, because they have like prehensile tails, which I don't believe apes have, right?
I believe you're right that apes do not. Yeah, simian refers to higher primates, an infraorder of primates containing all animals traditionally called. No, well, simian refers to all animals traditionally called monkeys or apes. So simian would be.
So simian is all of them.
It's what it looks like.
Yeah, because King Louie is very clearly an orangutan.
Yeah, right? Yeah, for sure. And then, I think you are right, though, that the rest of them maybe aren't, or they're supposed to be monkeys and not apes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, my question is, so we were introduced to them, and we get King Louie in his scene, and I wanted to know if the whole premise there, which this one at least kind of ties into the plot in a way, like at least kind of works in, is that King Louie offers Mowgli, like he says he'll like tell him how he can stay in the jungle. And I guess I don't even know if we ever find out what his like.
I always assumed that he was just like offering
kind
him
of like lying.
like I always assumed he was saying like, oh, then you can stay with us and our numbers are great enough that you'll be essentially safe.
Fair enough. But he offers him like something so he can stay in the jungle if Mowgli will show him, King Louie, how to make fire.
Yes.
Because he's very interested in being able to make fire, because that's what separates the apes from the humans, according to this movie, is that humans, can use tools and make fire. And he wants to be like you, hoo. So I want to know if any of that comes from the book.
Not really. King Louie isn't from the book at all. He's a brand new character for the movie. In the book, the monkeys want Mowgli to teach them to weave sticks together so that they can build more permanent housing.
Interesting. So similar, at least like
similar-ish.
Teach us like a human.
Yeah, teach us to do a thing that we don't know how to do. And
then is there offer that he can like stay with them, or like what is?
I mean, that's,
or do they
that's
just
not.
want him to do that?
They just want him to do that, and him being able to stay in the jungle is not an issue at that point.
Gotcha. Well, then this question doesn't gonna matter, but because then in the movie, what happens is that in order to, because Mowgli had sort of got kidnapped by the primate, they might be monkeys. The simians, the group of monkeys / apes that took him to King Louie, and in order to Baloo shows up, and in order to get him back, he like infiltrates the ranks by dressing up as an orangutan, and I was like, this is surely something just from the movie. This does not feel like a Rudyard Kipling type of hijinks that we would get.
I don't think Rudyard Kipling ever wrote any hijinks.
I would imagine it seems likely not. But I'm gonna assume, but I want to know, does Baloo dress up like an orangutan at any point?
Shockingly, he does not. He does fight the monkeys during that story, and he's like straight up decimating them.
Well, he is a bear.
Other than that, like their numbers are too high, so like he's getting overwhelmed, but he was decimating them.
Right, that makes sense. Then we get this fun little scene, or moment, line between Baloo and I think Bagheera at this point, after they have rescued Mowgli from King Louie and his group. And they're walking away, and Bagheera, I think the context of this is that Bagheera is trying to convince Baloo that Mowgli needs to go.
Yeah, that he belongs with the humans.
And in order to convince him of this, he's talking to Baloo, and he says to him, he needs to be with his kind because like you need to be with your kind. You wouldn't marry a panther, would you? Because Bagheera's a panther. And Baloo responds to that question by saying, no panther's ever asked me, which is based. Baloo is based. And I want to know if any of that comes from the book, because that's great. And I loved it.
Listen, it's a fun exchange. Not a bit of it is from the book.
Okay.
But I got very strong stick to your own kinds vibe from this movie.
Except for Baloo.
Watching it as an adult.
Who is also a protagonist. So I feel like they're playing a little bit of both sides here.
I don't know. It's interesting to me considering the time period.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
Considering that this movie came out 3 years after the Civil Rights Act was passed, and the same year as Loving v. Virginia.
Yeah.
Which is the Supreme Court case that legalized interracial marriage in America. And this is explicitly a joke about interracial marriage.
It is. But I think it's funny because I think in the moment we're supposed to side with Baloo, who says, I don't know, Panthers never asked me. Like he doesn't care. Like he hasn't thought about it. He's like, sure, maybe. I'm like, maybe I'd marry a panther. I don't know. And I think we're supposed to side with him in that moment, but the ultimate message of the film very clearly goes the other direction.
Stick to your own kind.
Stick to your own kind. Yeah, hang out with Mowgli needs to go be with humans, and this is the proper order of, nature and things. Yeah. And so, I agree that in that regard, it feels very weird and gross. I just thought this one particular line felt like it was at least playing the other direction to some extent. Despite the fact that it undercuts it later, and it made me like Baloo more. So
that's fair.
I just thought it was a fun, clever retort to Bagheera's bigotry. All right, a couple more questions here. So in the book or in the movie, at this point, Baloo and Mowgli have become fast friends, as I mentioned, and basically Mowgli is like just wants to live with the Baloo, and Baloo just wants him to stay with him. They're like, "This is great. You're great. We should just hang out." And I want to know if that dynamic comes from the book.
Not really. This is so different in the book. Like Mowgli being forced to leave the jungle, I have to stress again, is not an element the same way that it is in the movie. Like, I mean, his hand is being forced, yes. Probably not the decision that he would have made under the best of circumstances, but he's not like being frog marched to a human village.
Right.
He's also always known Baloo in the book. Because Baloo is the one who teaches young animals the ways of the jungle, like the jungle laws and the codes.
Okay, interesting. So they've always had a relationship.
Yeah.
But it's it's tough to compare it because the driving force in the film does not exist in the book. So how does that storyline? Maybe you'll get to it, but are you going to get to how that storyline's resolved in the book? Because it sounds like it's at least there initially. That he needs to go. Like Shere Khan's coming, we got to do something, and like, does that get resolved in a different way? You know what I mean? Like, because it gets resolved in the movie by him leaving and going to the human village, and
yeah, he does leave and go to the human village. Okay, because Shere Khan has essentially like done a coup to the wolf pack, so he doesn't have the protection of the pack anymore.
Okay.
So he leaves and he goes to the human village and he stays there for a while. And then while he's there, he finds out that Shere Khan is going to still like come try to hunt him while he's living in the village, basically. So he comes up with this plan, and he uses the buffalo, the village buffalo, because he's like being a shepherd, essentially. He's watching over the buffalo, and he uses the buffalo very strategically to trample Shere Khan to death.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. So that's okay. So very different, like you said. Fair enough. We're just going to move on because I don't know how to even square that with the film. So I assume this then doesn't happen, is that Baloo does not fight Shere Khan to save Mowgli. Is that not a thing that happens? Because I feel like a bear in the movie, Shere Khan is going to eat Mowgli, and then Baloo shows up and just starts fighting him, but he's getting his ass kicked by the tiger in the movie, and I feel like in real life a bear would kick a tiger's ass. I could be wrong. Be it interesting. I mean, I think it'll be a fairly fair fight, maybe, but I feel like a bear might kick a tiger's ass just purely based on size. And so I wanted to know if any of that comes from the book.
So no, Baloo never fights Shere Khan in the book. In canon, Baloo is a brown bear, right? Which is in North America is a grizzly, but in India, I think that would what?
No, a brown bear.
A brown bear.
Oh, I mean,
a brown bear is a grizzly.
I guess, yeah.
I looked it up.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
According to Wikipedia, a brown bear is a grizzly.
I'll take. Oh, yeah.
But in India, I think that would be the smaller Himalayan brown bear. There's a bunch of different kinds of brown bear. Yes. Is the thing.
Okay.
Now, I think a tiger would probably win, and the internet agrees with me because tigers are faster and have sharper claws. But I suppose a grizzly or a polar bear could give a tiger a run for its money.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is that
they're big.
If Baloo was like a grizzly, and again, because it doesn't make any sense. I guess because it depends on what kind of bear it is, and like if he's like a Himalayan sun bear or like a whatever you said a Himalayan brown bear, definitely would get, because they're tiny.
Yeah, they're
like
small,
relatively small. I was thinking more along the lines of a grizzly, which is what looks like proportionally Baloo is like the size of in the movie.
Big.
He's fairly large. And I was thinking a grizzly would I feel like a grizzly or a polar bear would just destroy every animal on Earth except for most of like a couple of them. I legitimately think
I think if the grizzly got a good enough initial hit on the tiger, yes. Otherwise, I think the tiger would ultimately win.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, is that tigers are faster and they can jump and stuff in ways that, like, if it was able to get on its back
tigers can move in
something,
ways that bears can't move.
Fair. That's fair. I'm just terrified of grizzly bears, so
Rightfully so.
That's what I was thinking of when I wrote that question. So ultimately, Baloo is sort of defeated by Shere Khan to some extent. He's harmed, injured grievously, but we're able to save the day by Mowgli coming in at the last second. And after some lightning hits a tree and lights it on fire, he grabs one of the sticks that's burning and he ties it, Shere Khan's tail around it, and Shere Khan is terrified of fire, and he sees this, and because it's tied to his tail, he can't get away from it, and so he runs off into the distance, shrieking and howling, and we've vanquished him. Even though he's obviously fine, or would be probably fine. Like eventually the stick would just go out, and be fine. But I wanted to know if that whole fire thing and the stick tied to the tail and all that, if any of that comes from the book.
So some of this is inspired by the book. Shere Khan is said to be terrified of fire. So around the end of Mowgli's Brothers, which is the one where he has to leave, the jungle, he does get a hold of some fire. It's not lightning though. He steals some from one of the villages. He sneaks into the village and steals fire, as you do.
Yeah.
And he does use it to intimidate Shere Khan. He beats him over the head with a flaming stick, but he doesn't tie it to him.
Okay.
And he just kind of uses it basically to get out of the situation safely.
Okay. So there is a flaming stick, but not remotely.
There is a flaming stick.
Not remotely the same context or anything like that. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, Baloo has been beaten up by Shere Khan, and they think he's dead. He's collapsed on the ground, and they all think he maybe has died. And Bagheera starts eulogizing Baloo, and we then see that Baloo kind of moves a little bit, and his eyes kind of squeak open, and he's listening. And we might even hear him. He might even say a couple things that only we, the audience, can hear.
Yeah, he does.
I think he does. But there's this. It's a very funny scene where Bagheera, who they've had a contentious-ish relationship because they're sort of their character traits do not exactly mesh, where Bagheera is a little bit more of a traditional kind of uptight, whatever, law of the jungle guy.
Yeah, they're the odd couple.
Baloo's a very vibes guy. And so anyways, he's listening to him eulogize him and enjoying that. And I wanted to know, I liked that scene in the movie, wanted to know if it came from the book.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
None of that is from the book.
All right, fine. Great. Perfect. And then finally, my last question is the big one, and it's my biggest bone to pick with this film, is that we then, after they've conquered Shere Khan, vanquished him, he's run off, tail between his legs on fire, and they stumble across they're at a pond or something like that, and all of a sudden there's this young village girl wanders down to get water from this river, stream, pond, lake, whatever, and Mowgli sees her and is immediately enraptured by her and decides, well, time to go live with humans. It's been real, y'all. Bye. And I hated it. It was the dumbest thing. And I wanted to know if that came from the book, because he just immediately abandons Baloo and Bagheera. He literally shrugs at them you know how it is. And then I was like, what is happening? I did not remember that this was the ending of the Jungle Book. And it felt like I was being pranked. I was like, what is this ending? She makes giant Disney eyes at him for 35 seconds. And he literally shrugs and runs off with her into the village. And I was like, what? This is the dumbest ending to a Disney movie I can recall. And I'm sorry if you like the end of this movie, but I was wildly disappointed / amused with this ending. It was incredible to me.
No, it's a super weird ending. It's not from the book. There is a story, I can't remember which one it is now. It might be the one where he actually kills Shere Khan. But there is a story that ends with a mention that Mowgli eventually married a human woman from one of the villages.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
no, even as a kid, I thought this was a super weird ending, even though I had what I now realize was a bit of a crush on the girl. But yeah, it's weird. It's anticlimactic.
It's very anticlimactic.
He gets enticed to the village by this random girl who reacts pretty oddly to a strange boy appearing out of the jungle.
Zero reaction. She's like, cool, whatever.
Maybe this is a common occurrence. I don't know. But her reaction is basically like, time to flirt.
Yep, let's flirt it up. Random person I've never seen before and you would think, like, I don't know when time period this is supposed to be taking place, but yeah, you would think that she would be like maybe a little more weary of random strangers just
appearing out of the
jungle, but whatever.
I don't know. I have to question again why this movie wanted to end things with him going back to the village so badly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if Shere Khan is defeated, he should be able to stay in the jungle. That was the main, roadblock to him staying in the jungle.
And he's not defeated in the sense that he's not dead or anything.
Right.
But you know how to...
But it's a Disney villain defeat.
Right, yes. And also, he's afraid of fire. You now know... Like if you want to think it through a little bit more, because you're right, it's just like, a Disney villain, like, oh, you won, like, he won't bother you anymore, or whatever. But even if you want to, nitpick it and be like, well, but he could just come back and eat you later. Now you know he's scared of fire, and you know how to give fire. Just give fire, and when he shows up, hit him with a fire stick. There you go. I don't know. It just...
No.
Yeah.
I don't know. This ending, it's kind of a 1-2 punch of the stick to your own kind stuff that we talked about.
Absolutely, yes.
While also being a weird random reinforcement of traditional gender roles out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's another one of those things, too, that reminded me of how much every right-winger's criticism of sexualizing children is nonsense, because this is the type of thing that they love. These old Disney movies would be the thing that they would point to, and it's like the ending of this movie is literally it's like a sex comedy scene.
She's
it's like a scene out of
singing about wanting a husband and making eyes
she makes
at this
giant flirty eyes
boy.
At him, and he literally is like, well, you know how it is, I gotta go get some. And it's like, what is you're like 10? What is happening? It's insanity. It's not insane. It's terrible. It's an awful ending. I hated it a lot. It was really bad.
There is a Jungle Book 2 in which I believe she's a main character, but I've never seen it.
And maybe it's better in a sequel. Maybe things get explored more. I don't know.
That was one of those. Remember the era in the 2000s when Disney was pumping out direct to video sequels for basically all of their animated properties, and a lot of those were not good. But who knows? Maybe this one is good.
Maybe. Maybe. I would also be interested to see other adaptations of this because I think most of the other adaptations probably follow a similar story structure in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be interested to see how they end.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, yeah, terrible. Awful. All right, I got one question for Lost in Adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
How did King Louis hear about Mowgli? In the book, or in the movie, he seems to know who he is and stuff in a way that feels weird, considering it seems like Mowgli has never been out in the world to where anybody I don't know. It felt like he knew all about him and knew that I just wanted to know if there was any I already know the answer to this. He's not in the book.
Yeah, he's not in the book. And the monkeys in the book just know of Mowgli because he's part of the jungle and so are they, which is how that works. And I agree that this is not well set up. I also think it's the kind of plot hole that most people probably don't notice.
I mean, fair. Yeah.
I think the answer is probably monkey spies.
Sure. Sounds good. All right, let's find out what Katie thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
Overall, I wish the wolves had been in the movie a bit more.
I agree.
Like we said.
Yeah.
They're much bigger players in the book. two of the wolves actually help Mowgli eventually take down Shere Khan. So, Bagheera, we find out, was actually born in captivity. And he's very respected because he knows the ways of both man and the jungle. And that's also part of the reason that he initially speaks up for Mowgli, like vouches for him, because he feels like they have like a kinship and like being part of both worlds.
That is actually interesting. That would
Yeah.
have definitely been an interesting angle to explore.
So I had seen this movie quite a few times in my childhood, a lot. I had never read the book before, and after reading the book, I kind of straight up hate what the movie does with Kaa's character. He's kind of like this buffoonish villain, like the B villain in the movie. But in the book, he's a really interesting and powerful, morally gray character. He helps Baloo and Bagheera rescue Mowgli from the monkeys, and then he stays behind and murders and eats a bunch of the monkeys. The monkeys, during that scene, also throw Mowgli into a pit of snakes when he doesn't immediately give them what they want. But it's
That would've been
fine.
fun.
But it's fine because he knows the code of the jungle, so he knows like what to say to the snakes so that they don't attack him. And that also like causes Kaa to respect Mowgli, and he's like, "You're pretty okay. I'll try to remember not to eat you at some point." But he's a really interesting character.
Yeah.
While we're on that subject, Baloo.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hate what the movie does with Baloo as well.
I love Baloo.
Hey, look, he's a fun character. He's fun. He's vibes. I
Right.
get it. What he is in the book is basically a law professor. And
Okay, you're not making me like him more.
He's one of the most respected animals in the jungle. He's the only non-wolf who sits on the pack council.
Oh, wow.
He's so super respected, and they make him into a shiftless jungle bum. Like, he's a cool character, and the odd couple of him and Bagheera work, even though it's an overdone trope. And Bare Necessities is also a bop, but like, it feels disrespectful. It feels disrespectful to me.
Sure. I'll let you be offended on Baloo's behalf. I like his character in the movie. I think he's fun.
And my last note here is the movie's treatment of how all of the other animals react to Shere Khan. Because in the movie, like, everybody is terrified of him, just like straight up. And the book I felt like was more nuanced. Like, he's obviously a threat, but they aren't all like bowing and scraping and terrified. And especially like, obviously the prey animals are more scared of him, but like the animals that could go toe to toe with him, like Baloo and Bagheera and the wolf pack, are kind of like, okay, dude.
Yeah.
Calm down.
Right.
Like, Now, I will say that I like both versions' treatment of Shere Khan as a character, though. In the book, he's kind of a bluffing coward, which is interesting.
Right.
But I also liked the movie's depiction of him as so confident that he doesn't need to like rant and roar and puff himself up. He's just kind of calm most of the time. And I think that works especially well for like the truncated, simplified narrative that we have in the movie. But I think both versions of his character are interesting.
Yeah, I would agree. It sounds like the book version is more like somebody, imagine like a Gaston or something like that, who kind of has this like bravado that he's projecting to hide, you know, kind of and like everybody else is like, yeah, man, okay, sure, fine. And like, we get it. Like, yeah, you're big and bad. Like, cool. Like, I mean, you are, but also like whatever. But the movie's version, yeah, it is very simple. It gives us a more sort of typical villain character who's just terror inducing and, you know, like the big bad in all of the ways that sort of, you know, requires. But anyways, I think both could be interesting for sure. All right, let's talk about now what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
I like the jungle theme part of the score. The like music that plays underneath. It's very nice and mysterious. I enjoyed it. I thought making Bagheera the narrator, however briefly that was, I thought that was pretty appropriate.
Makes
The
sense.
movie ditches that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I did think it was appropriate. The movie's animators, character designers, seem to understand what a 10 to 11-year-old boy looks like. Whereas the book's illustrator, I did not.
No.
I was laughing about it reading in the car the other day. Like, there's a picture of Mowgli, and again, he's supposed to be 11 years old, where he has like a full-on six-pack.
He looks like a 26-year-old
Yeah.
Tarzan. Is what he
Yes.
looks like.
Yes.
But he's 11.
I
yeah.
know there's this TikTok account that occasionally pops up on my For You page that determines whether or not a medieval artist has ever seen a baby based on like
Yeah.
how they paint babies.
Right.
And I think that this illustrator had never seen a prepubescent boy.
Yeah. Very possible.
So in the book,
Or they were tracing George of the Jungle. Well, I guess that would've been
they
after.
could have been tracing a Tarzan.
Or that's what I meant,
template,
Tarzan. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks way more Tarzan-ish in
Yeah.
some of the illustrations. So in the book, Shere Khan was born with like a bum leg. They don't really go into details on like exactly what's up with his leg, but one of his names means the lame one. And there's not ever really like a payoff for that as far as I could tell though, so I was fine with cutting it.
I mean, it seems like it could be potentially tied into what you're talking about when you talked about in the last note and better in the book about sort of him being like this
Like
bluffing, overcompensating.
Yeah,
kind of.
I think it is more like a character or like a symbolic thing
Yeah.
more than it is a plot thing. But again, we don't need it if we're changing his character, and there's
Yeah.
not a plot line reason to have it. So
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't work with the character as written in the film, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Or at least I don't think it would.
Shere Khan's voice casting, perfect.
Yeah.
Great choice.
Yeah, that guy's great. Can't remember his name now. They actually made the tiger. The animation, the drawing, they modeled it after the actor's face, to make him look more like the actor playing him. They did that with several characters, but specifically Shere Khan was the one that I remember reading that, and now IMDb is down. IMDb is down. Hello, what? It is played by George Sanders. I thought it was George something. Yeah, George Sanders. Who? Yeah, if you look at a picture of George Sanders, in particular his nose and the shape of his face, you can see a little bit of where they drew some of the stuff into him. But yeah, he does a great job as Shere Khan.
My last note here, I actually really like the vultures. I think their song goes maybe a smidge too long.
Yeah, it's possible.
But I like them as characters. I think it's a fun little sequence.
I think it would have been more fun if it was the Beatles, but it's still
True.
Fun.
Yeah.
It's still fun.
And I think it's fun that they end up being like good guys.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, vultures typically not.
Yeah.
Kind of like in Lion King with the hyenas.
Right.
One of those things that tend to be depicted as villains. Carrion or scavenger animals tend to be portrayed
Nature's
as villains.
cleanup crew.
Yeah. And so yeah, it's nice that they're not. All right, let's talk about a couple things that the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
The book does have a time jump in it. We jump from Mowgli being a baby to him being around 10 or 11. So that's the same. Bagheera and Baloo do have a moment where they disagree on Baloo being too rough with Mowgli during his lessons. And the monkeys do, when they kidnap Mowgli, they like swing him off through the trees. And they do live at like some ancient ruins. So that's all similar.
Cool. All right, we got a handful of odds and ends to get to before the final verdict. The movie opens, and I didn't actually realize, I realized I didn't remember if this is something that Disney movies do all the time, and my brain was like, maybe? And that is that it opens with a live action shot of somebody opening the Jungle Book, the book. And then we like zoom into the book, and then it transitions into the animated film. And I was like, wait, is that something they did, or is that like only this movie? And I knew you would know, so I
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's very common for classic Disney. All the classic princess fairy tales have a storybook opening. Pinocchio, Sword and Stone, Robin Hood, quite a few others. The last animated feature in that kind of like original run of that opening style was The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh in 1977. But it was spoofed by both Chicken Little and Enchanted later on.
Okay.
I've never actually seen Chicken Little, but Enchanted, it makes sense to spoof that opening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it is, I think, best known from like the classic princess stories.
And as I say, I was like, I think at first I was like, oh, that I don't remember.
Yeah,
And then I
Snow
was like,
White,
I think I do.
Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty all start with the book opening.
Right.
So personally, I don't find the animation style of this movie, this era, really, to be anything super special.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I do think the backgrounds in this movie are quite lovely.
Yeah, I think they're nice. They reminded me a little bit of Lilo and Stitch, kind of almost like that watercolor.
Yeah, they're kind of like a more saturated watercolor.
Nebulous kind of, jungle.
And it's a very like late 60s color palette.
Yeah.
Interesting looking.
Yeah. I thought it looked okay. Definitely not one of the more like memorable visual Disney movies, but it's all right. When Ka is introduced in this movie, I had a very vivid sort of like brainwave flashback memory of Ka. I was like, oh yeah, I remember this character. Like,
yeah,
nothing else in the movie really did that particularly, but Ka, man, was like, oh, I remember this snake voice for sure.
And I don't remember if you mentioned this in the prequel.
I don't think I did.
But Sterling Holloway, who was the voice of Ka, he did tons of voice acting for Disney. He was also the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. But he's probably best remembered as Winnie the Pooh.
And as soon as I read that note, I was like, you know what? That's also probably part of it. Is that I remembered him as Winnie the Pooh.
It's almost the same voice.
The same voice with like more of a hiss.
Yeah, he does a little more of a hiss on the S's with
Ka. But it's a similar type of voice. And I think that's probably what my brain was like.
Yeah.
'Cause I definitely remember watching quite
He's
a bit
also
of
the
Winnie
snake
Pooh.
in Robin Hood.
I've seen Robin Hood, but probably like once when I was really little. And the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. But yeah, Winnie the Pooh for sure. I think that's what my brain was like dialed in on.
All right, so let's get to the big thing here. Let's talk about the racism of the monkeys in the book compared to the racism of the monkeys in the movie.
Okay. So we're already starting out. They're definitely both racist.
We're just gonna, just
parsing
up
how
front,
and why.
Yeah, we're gonna parse it a little bit, but it's all definitely racist. So in our prequel episode, we put a couple of pins and things for later. One of those was that Kipling believed in imperialism or empire building as a moral crusade.
Yep.
Right? He believed that it was the moral duty of white people to enlighten non-white races and bring them into civilization.
Yes.
And a lot of white people believed the same. A lot of white people still believe the same, but we can talk about mission trips another time.
Yep.
Another thing that we put a pin in is that many scholars interpret the Jungle Books as allegories for the politics and society of the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So unfavorable comparisons of people of color to animals, and especially Black people to monkeys, has a long history. I went and checked and made sure that Kipling did not somehow predate that. He does not.
No way.
So in the story, Ka's hunting, the Banderlog, which is what he calls the monkey people, are depicted as living separately from the rest of the citizens of the jungle because they're just too stupid to live by some kind of code.
Which is so wild because famously
monkeys are smart.
Apes are smarter than most other animals.
And it's stated in the story that the monkey folk have no laws, i.e. they have no civilization.
Also,
right? Remember, Kipling puts a lot of stake in law and order. That's one of the major themes of this story.
Which, from my understanding, certain groups of primates, chimpanzees and stuff, are some of the few animals in the animal kingdom that do, in fact, have some like loose form of like rules and
something
like
that is recognizable as
structure,
a law.
Kind of deal.
Yes. So they have no laws, which from Kipling's viewpoint and from the viewpoint of the time means that they have no civilization.
Right.
Right? They're described as evil, dirty, shameless, and liars. All of which is pretty problematic considering that they're very clearly a stand-in for quote-unquote uncivilized non-white people,
Yep.
especially compared to the law-abiding, civilized jungle folk, right? AKA our white people in this allegory. So now that we have that context, let's apply that context to the movie's depiction of the monkeys. Okay, so first off, I want to say I think that having the monkeys be after fire and not stick weaving works narratively for the film. It sets up Mowgli eventually using fire on Shere Khan pretty nicely.
Yep.
But thematically, it's almost more racist.
I mean, yeah.
Like fire is a symbol, like you said.
I mean, we're minting levels of racism here from incredibly racist to still incredibly racist, but just a little less.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, fire as a symbol often depicted as a civilizing force, right? It's the thing that separates man from beasts. It's the difference between a caveman digging in the dirt and a society with a capital S.
Right.
Right? That's how it's depicted symbolically in literature since forever.
Oh yeah, always, yeah.
And then to take that further, Disney knows that it's gonna be considered racist to imply that these monkeys are symbolic of black people, right?
Yes.
They know that.
Walt Disney specifically, we talked about it in the
That's why
prequel
they didn't
episode.
hire Louis Armstrong as King Louis.
That was supposedly the reason is they did not get Louis Armstrong to play King Louis because Disney was like, oh, people will say that's racist to have a black guy play a monkey or an ape in this instance.
And the problem is that association is baked in.
Yeah.
Partly due to the reference material and partly just due to white supremacy.
Yeah.
It's a feature.
Yeah.
It's not something that can be done away with by hiring an Italian guy instead.
Not to mention specifically, as I mentioned in the prequel, all of the other monkeys, at least all the ones that, according to the notes I found, that kidnap Mowgli, were played by black actors.
Yeah. So we have all of this baggage, right? Hundreds of years of baggage baked into this. And then they have the monkeys sing about how much they wish they could be real humans.
Sing jazz, like big band jazz standards. Yeah, Yeah.
I wish I was a real human. Wow.
Yes. Also, I don't know if you noticed this, in that scene, the orangutans pick up, or the other monkeys or whatever, it's not the ones that are brought in there, after at one point after Baloo is revealed to be Baloo, he's like trying to distract King Louis by like tickling him or something, and the other monkeys pick up a giant like battering ram or something. Maybe it's like a fallen totem. I don't know what it is. They pick up something and they run it into Baloo, or the pillar next to him. They run into something, and the battering ram in that scene is some statue that is like a blackface caricature. It looks like I don't know what it's supposed to be, but I was like, what is that? What? That's not great.
Look, you can't undo what's been done here.
Nope.
And if this is it's a movie that you like, maybe this is your favorite part of the movie. I don't think you should feel shit about that, because we don't always know these things.
No.
You know,
especially
not when we're kids.
Oh God, yeah, especially when
and yeah, this is just a soup of different associations of things coming to us from a lot of different points in history that resulted in something that is pretty problematic.
Yep. There's a reason Disney slapped that big warning ahead of it, and it's because of this.
And it's kind of an interesting example too, though, because I think like surface level it is problematic, yes, but like once you get into it, it's like so much worse.
Yeah, because I think even surface level is problematic, but I think you can even be forgiven for not really not really like getting why, like without really thinking about it too much. I think you could be, I don't want to say forgiven, but I think if you didn't really think about it and you were kind of just ignorant to it, it's not one of those things that's as surface level obvious as some other problematic things that Disney has done. Like even like I would say like the crows in
I think the
Dumbo
are
more obviously problematic than,
or like if you want to get really obvious, the Native American tribe in Peter Pan,
right? Yes, that's probably even a better example. Like those are more obviously problematic, I think, because they are, but yeah, it is. There's a deep seated sort of
the racism of this scene is incredibly deep rooted, with roots stretching back to several points in history.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that even, like you said, even Disney and people at Disney realized was there.
Yeah.
And their fix for it was just don't cast a black guy to play the main character, but then change nothing else about it, seemingly.
Which honestly, just my opinion, I think the better choice to mitigate it, have them sing about anything else.
Yes. Yeah, there's a bunch of, I would be interested to see what the 2016 remake does.
Yeah.
I just looked it up because I wanted to know who played, if King Louis was in the 2016 version and who played him. It's in the movie, played by Christopher Walken, which is interesting. And but who knows what the circumstances, there's a million things that could have changed.
Which I don't know if they did any music in the 2016 one or not.
Oh yeah, I don't know either.
I have no idea.
I think they did, but I don't know.
I've never seen it because I'm aggressively uninterested.
Yeah, me too. The only thing that made it interesting was when I scrolled through and I saw who played Shere Khan, which is Idris Elba, which I think would be
interesting.
Also, Kaz played by Scarlett Johansson. I knew nothing about this movie.
That makes me.
Bagheera's played by Ben Kingsley. That makes sense. I feel like, I guess at least a little bit.
I guess at least a little.
He's got, anyways, a lot going on there. Oh boy. We mentioned in the prequel episode, you could see Bambi's mom, and yep, that was definitely Bambi's mom in that one scene.
Nailed it. I did the Leo DiCaprio point.
Yep.
So that you would notice.
Yeah. No, I noticed before you. Yeah, I noticed as soon as I saw the deer standing there. I was like, oh yeah, okay, right, great. Yeah, that's what that is. I also thought it was very funny that they reused that shot from Bambi as well as another shot of the wolves from like 101 Dalmatians or something, vice versa.
I think it's the other way around.
Something maybe. Like that, yeah. But they also reused a shot in this movie. There's the moment early on where Ka gets his tail stuck in a tree and then it like catapults out of it and he like accordions and then he like wobbles away like he like slithers away all weird, and they use that exact same shot again later in the movie when Ka shows up again, the exact same and I was like, well, that's something else.
A lot of the snake animation and a lot of Baloo's as well gets reused in Robin Hood. And real quick, because I just had like a memory blast, the thing that I was thinking was potentially reused or reused again in 101 Dalmatians, I think I'm wrong about that. There's a quick shot at the beginning of the movie where Mowgli like the wolves like jump on him and they're like licking his face. That's reused from The Sword in the Stone.
That's what it is. I knew there was something else from something prior that was reused in this one, but I don't know
why my brain is only good for this kind of thing, but you're all welcome.
Oh goodness.
My last note here is I am really curious to know what the Vulture song would have been if it had been a Beatles style song. And I think maybe there's like a brief interlude in that song where it stops being a barbershop quartet for a minute and like a guitar, like an acoustic guitar comes in.
Yeah.
And I was like, aha.
That's probably.
I wonder if that's what it was going to be.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was something more in the vein of what they were going to do with it, for sure. Yeah, I think so. All right, before we get to the final verdict, we wanted to remind you that you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there for a couple bucks a month. You get access to different things at each level. At $5 and up per month, you get access to our bonus content which this month coming out here before too long, or no, sorry, next month, or it's already out for May. It's
May
Pacific
is out,
Rim, yeah. Which, well, when you're listening to this, it's technically June 1st. If you're listening to it when it came out, but last month just came out a couple weeks ago. We talked about Pacific Rim. Coming out in June, though, in a couple weeks, we'll be talking about one of my favorite, if not my favorite movie of all time. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. The greatest film ever made, The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser. So get excited for that. We'll be talking about that sometime towards the middle/end of June. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, all of those different places. Keep up with us there, interact with us, and we'll talk about your comments about the stuff that we talk about in the prequel episodes. That's where we get your feedback and we converse about said feedback. At the $15 and up patron level, just going back again for just a second, you get priority recommendations status, whatever. I don't know. You get priority recommendations where if you support us for $15 a month and you recommend something or request something that you want to hear us talk about, it will move high up on our list and go into the rotation as quick, or not rotation, but go into the lineup as quick as we can get it in there. And this, in fact, was a patron request from one
Shelby Suderman.
Shelby, thank you very much. Shelby says Monsters and Mayhem is out now. Go check out Monsters and Mayhem. One of her stories was featured in, it's a collection of short horror stories, I believe.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
So there you go. Go look for Monsters and Mayhem and read Shelby's story. But thank you, Shelby, for recommending The Jungle Book. Hope you enjoyed our discussion. Katie, it's time now for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
Okay, so I'm going to get my bias out in the open before I really start. I think the film, as a Disney classic, is overrated. I'm sorry if it's your favorite. We all have different fond childhood favorites, and that's fine.
I just said The Mummy starring Brendan Fraser is the greatest film ever made, so there you go.
There's a lot of stuff that I love that I fully acknowledge is trash. But I just think that if Walt Disney had not died during the making of this film, it would not have achieved the status that it has today. I think that's a fair assessment. And I genuinely don't think it's any better than the other Disney animated films of the same era, many of which either had to wait for the advent of VHS to gain a sort of cult status, or are still largely forgotten. People just don't really care. But I was actually surprised by how much I enjoyed about the book. The themes, characters, and plots were much more layered and nuanced than I would have guessed based on just having seen the movie. Especially the characters. I found pretty much every character to be a more layered and interesting character than their movie counterpart was. The hard truth is that both these versions of the story, for whatever good we can say about them, reveal ugly things about their respective cultures and time periods. For me, the movie managed to keep most of that while also eliminating what made the book interesting to me. And for that reason, primarily, I'm giving this one to the book.
All right. There you go. Katie chose The Jungle Book. Like literally The Jungle Book. The book. Katie, what's next?
Up next, we're kicking...
If you're not following us on social media, you're missing out because this was revealed already.
This was revealed on social media, so if you follow us on any of our platforms, you might already know this. If not, boy, do I have a surprise for you, because up next, we are kicking off Summer Series 2022, and we are talking about 50 Shades of Grey.
Yep. Yes, we are. Absolutely. Yeah. If you didn't follow us on social media, go follow us and like that picture. I spent a lot of time setting up the lighting. And by a lot of time, I mean like 20 minutes in one light.
You spent a lot of time nitpicking my editing skills.
No, my editing. I was the one who edited.
I was the one who did the text.
Oh, right. Not nitpicking your editing skills. I was merely, look, homage slash spoof is the oeuvre that I live in when it comes to creative expression. It's one of the things I'm good at. And so I had a little bit of, feedback on how the text was formatted and the font usage and all that sort of things. But I spent a lot of time taking the picture, finagling my tie into the right, like, angle to get the lighting to hit it right and everything. So I was pretty proud of how that picture came out. In case you didn't realize, that is not the cover of the book that we just photoshopped over.
That is Brian's one tie that was the right color.
Yeah, my silver tie that I have. It's like a grayish silver. But anyways, took some time to get there. So pretty happy with how they came out. Go check that out on Facebook and Twitter, all those places. But yes, we're talking about 50 Shades of Grey. I'm actually really excited to talk about it because I don't know if our discussion will go the way everybody expects it to go. Well, and maybe in regards to the book. I don't know. I'm interested to see. We'll see. I don't know. I'm interested to have this discussion.
I'm very excited because I have heard so much about the quality of the writing of these books.
Yes.
And I am absolutely fascinated to see for myself.
Yes, I have not started it yet. I was planning to start it this evening or tomorrow to really dive in and start reading through it. But yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be fun. And it should be a fun summer series. So look out for that in 2 weeks' time. And in 1 week's time, we're previewing 50 Shades of Grey. I don't know what we're learning about yet. We'll figure that out when we get there. But we'll also be talking about what you all had to say about the Jungle Book. So go, like we mentioned, go follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Respond to us and let us know what you thought about the Jungle Book, and we'll discuss it in the prequel episode in 1 week's time. And until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.